What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Back with yet another schedule preview and record prediction video. And today we're going to be going through the 2020 Miami Hurricanes. The U is expected to get better this year after a pretty disappointing season last year. And I'll do a deep dive in that a little bit. But let's see what they are coming back with this year. Well, they're getting quarterback Derek King from Houston. He is coming in through the transfer portal at quarterback. They also have N'Kosi Perry and Tate Martell back there at quarterback. So should be pretty good at quarterback, especially if Derek King can return to his 2018 self. And on the defensive side, they are losing a lot on the defensive side on what was a pretty good defense last year, but they are returning a lot on the defensive line, including Gregory Rousseau, who was pretty good this year and only expected to be better this year. So let's see if Miami is only going to get better and possibly can compete for an ACC title this year, or if the Miami Hurricanes are not going to return to their former glory and disappoint this season. Here's the schedule for the Miami Hurricanes, and you'll look down there. Their 2019 record was 6-7. So they went 6-6 in the regular season. They had some pretty decent wins, like they beat Florida State. They ended up beating Virginia Tech as well. Had some pretty good wins, and then ended up they played Florida pretty close in week 0 as well. And we all know what Florida did last year. Then when you look, they did end up making a bowl game, but it was an absolute embarrassment, in my opinion. If I were a Miami fan, I would not want to be talking about this game, but they lost 14-0 to Louisiana Tech in their bowl game. They didn't even score a point. Just not a good season for the Hurricanes overall. But you'll look up there, their home games are going to be in orange, and their away games are going to be in green. So without further ado, let's see if Miami is going to have a fresh start in 2020. And you'll look, their first game, the home game against the Temple Owls. Now, I've talked about Temple a lot in previous videos in which teams play Temple. And Temple is a team that is always usually pretty decent. They always play a lot of teams really close, maybe even beat a team that they shouldn't. Year after year, Temple does that. And this year, I don't expect that to change. I expect Temple to still be a pretty decent team. Now, I do not think that they have the talent that Miami is going to have, but it is the first game of the season. I think Temple could make it closer than a lot of people think, especially since we're not practicing a lot, and Miami is getting in some transfers that they're really questionable about, and they just got to replace a lot. So I think this game could be closer than a lot of people think, but I still think at the end of the day, Miami's going to get the win here. Then their second and third game of the season should be fairly easy ones. First one is a game against Wagner, and that's an FCS team. Miami should have no trouble there. And then it's going to be a Thursday game against the UAB Blazers. And UAB is a team that ever since they got their football program back, they've been fairly decent. They were Conference USA runner-ups last year, only second to Florida Atlantic, who had Lane Kiffin at head coach. This game could be good for maybe a quarter or two, but I see Miami pulling away after halftime. Then a big non-conference game. I'm still excited about this one, even with what we know now, but they're going to be facing the Michigan State Spartans in Spartan Stadium now. This one I think is going to be closer than a lot of people think, because although I think Michigan State is going to be an absolute disaster this year, they could very well make this game pretty darn close. It's in Spartan Stadium. It's going to be a game that they're going to want to win to maybe build some momentum before they really get into a Big Ten play. And Miami is a team that's got to replace a lot. So this game could be closer than a lot of people think. But the big thing for Michigan State is they are getting a new head coach in Mel Tucker after Mark D'Antonio left. And I've been saying this a lot, and I think we got to give Mel Tucker a couple of years before Michigan State can return to its former glory, because I think Mel Tucker has got a lot of potential, but Miami, to me, just has more talent than Michigan State. So I'm going to slightly lean towards the Hurricanes in this one. I think they're going to be able to win this one by maybe 7 to 10 points, but definitely closer than I think a lot of people predict this game to be right now. Then they get into ACC play, and their first is a home game against the Pittsburgh Panthers. I think they're going to be able to win this game, but a lot of people overlook Pitt. They got some of the best defensive backs in the ACC. Pickett is returning as their quarterback. He's pretty decent. Just got to replace a lot of guys around Pickett, though. And while I think their defense is going to be pretty good, Pitt's offense worries me a little bit. And it is a road game for the Pittsburgh Panthers, and Miami is the more talented team, in my opinion. And I think Hurricanes should be able to pretty comfortably win this one. But Pitt definitely could make it close. But I think by this point, it's before what I think is going to be a bigger road game than people think, and Miami should be able to get back to its former glory so many years ago by this point. Then they have to play a Friday game against the Wake Forest Deacons. So this game is on the road, and I feel like Miami could trip up here. I'd put this game on upset alert. I feel like it would be an upset if Wake Forest beat Miami, because Wake Forest is losing Jamie Newman at quarterback and lots of other weapons. Wake Forest is not going to be as good as they were last year, but a lot of people forget about Sam Hartman. And I know I've said it a lot, but Sam Hartman, I really do like Sam Hartman as a quarterback. Big reason why that passing attack for Wake Forest was so good last year. They just got to replace some wide receiver weapons, and I think they maybe have a wide receiver or two that Sam Hartman trusts by this point, and it could be a very dangerous game for Miami. But I think Greg Rousseau and that defense from Miami are getting back in the full swing by this point. It's going to be a big road game for a Miami, game that they're not going to want to lose, and I'm going to slightly lean towards the Hurricanes to win this game against Wake Forest. And they get their bye week, and in my opinion, perfect place for a bye week. It splits your season in half. It's after a tricky road game and before a very, very big home game against the North Carolina Tar Heels. So North Carolina is a team that I only expect to improve this year, returning Sam Howell, returning lots of weapons on wide receiver. Their offensive line is going to be one of the better ones in the ACC, if not the end of the season in the country. Defense could use a little bit of work, but overall it's a really solid defense. But I think that Miami, Derek King is getting back to his former self. They're probably playing N'Kosi Perry a little bit as well. Maybe Tate Martell gets a snap or two. I don't know. But I feel like Miami's offense has got a lot figured out, and I feel like their defense has got a lot figured out by this point as well. It's going to be a very close game in my opinion, but I am going to slightly lean towards North Carolina. Yes, I know it is in Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida, but I think North Carolina is just the way more talented team, and I feel like they've played better competition than Miami has up to this point, because North Carolina's got to play UCF and Auburn for their first two games this season. I just feel like North Carolina's going to come into this game more prepared, be able to win a close one, but I definitely could see Miami being able to beat North Carolina. Then a road game against Virginia. Now, I believe that Miami is the way more talented team than Virginia, especially since Virginia is losing their quarterback, Bryce Perkins, who, if you knew anything about Virginia last year, was basically their entire offense, and they're going to have to replace him. Defense should be fairly decent up to this point, but Miami's just the way more talented team, and especially if they can come off a win against North Carolina, they're going to have a lot of momentum, so Miami should be able to beat Virginia pretty handily here. Then a home game against Florida State. This is also another big home game because, to me, Florida State is still the more talented team than Miami, but again, this game is in Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida. Florida State is getting James Blackman back at quarterback, and Chubba Purdy can be really, really good if he gets some snaps. Wide receivers are going to be great. Their defense is pretty darn good as well. This game is very, very even. To me, it really could go either way, but I am going to slightly lean towards the Florida State Seminoles just because, as I said, they played some tough games up to this point too, and they are the more talented team. But again, like the North Carolina game, not going to be surprised if Miami pulls out this win. So then Miami gets a road game against the Virginia Tech Hokies, and this is a game that I do think they are going to lose. Virginia Tech just is the more talented team, and they are a young team returning a lot, and they played a lot of big games up to this point, and I don't think Virginia Tech's got anything to lose by this point. I think they only got stuff to gain, especially if they end up beating North Carolina. They have a shot at an ACC championship berth, and I don't think they're going to let Miami stand in their way. So I think the Hokies will get the win here. Then a road game against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and a team that is only expected to improve this year. Georgia Tech is returning a lot, one of the top teams in returning production in the entire nation, a team that I really like this year in the ACC. I think they definitely have the potential to make a bowl game, But Miami is still just the way more talented team, and I feel like Miami has got absolutely everything figured out by this point. They're going to come off a bitter loss, in my opinion, to the Virginia Tech Hokies in back-to-back road games in the ACC. A game that I don't think is going to be easy for Miami in Georgia Tech, but I do feel like Miami is going to be able to pull away with the win here. Just too much talent for Miami, and I believe everyone is in full swing for the Hurricanes by this point. Which brings us to the final game of the season against the Duke Blue Devils. These two teams have had some really good games in the past. Duke has finally fixed their quarterback issue, bringing in the transfer from Clemson in Chase Bryce, and I think he's going to be able to boost this Duke offense just a little bit, but the defense is what worries me for Duke, and ultimately where I feel like Miami is going to be able to win this game. They're going to be able to overpower Duke's defense and come away with a victory. All right, so now with everything being said and considered for the Miami Hurricanes, I have them going 8-4. So I do feel like Miami is going to only improve this year, and they're going to be a really solid team in the ACC and a dangerous one at that. I think they can make a lot of noise. But they got some tricky games, as I said, North Carolina and Florida State, but both of those games are at home. So they, in my opinion, I think are going to be able to win one of those games, but I definitely could see them losing both of them. Virginia Tech on the road, as I said, is not going to be an easy game. I think they'll lose that one. On the road at Michigan State is tricky, but I feel like they can win. Definitely could see them losing that one, and I definitely could see them losing on the road to Wake Forest. So they got a lot of bumps in the road, but Miami overall, I think, does have the potential to be a very, very good team. So now let's look at their record range and what this is. I take this team's worst-case scenario along with their best-case scenario. That's where I expect them to be this season. And the worst-case scenario I have for Miami is 5-7. De'Aaron King is more than likely going to be the starter, going to get the nod over N'Kosi Perry. And if that happens and De'Aaron King just cannot return to his 2018 self and Greg Rousseau just doesn't play like he did last year, the defense could not elevate to where they were last year, I could see Miami missing out on a bowl game. Like I said, they got a lot of tricky games. Now, Temple Wagner, UAB shouldn't be too big of a problem, but I definitely could see them tripping up on the road at Michigan State. Pitt might get them after a bitter loss to Michigan State, and then they could lose a third straight game on the road to Wake Forest before a big game against North Carolina. They just got a lot of spots where they can hiccup and fall, and I feel like 5-7 is the absolute worst case scenario for the Miami Hurricanes. Again, if De'Aaron King just doesn't pan out and the defense does not return to its glory of last year, 5-7, where I have the Hurricanes as their worst case scenario. But now their absolute best case scenario for me is going to be 10-2. Like I said, I feel like Miami has a lot of tricky games, but they have the potential to win those games. On the road at Michigan State is going to be tricky, but I feel like they're going to be able to win that game. On the road at Wake Forest is going to be tricky, but I feel like they're going to be able to win that game. And then, as I said, they have North Carolina and Florida State at home, two of the higher teams in the ACC. I feel like they're going to be able to win one of those games, and maybe they can win both. They got them in Hard Rock. On the road at Virginia Tech is going to be tricky, but maybe they can pull off an upset. But as I said, there are just too many places for them to slip up. I see them slipping up at minimum twice this year, just because I don't think they're going to be able to compete with a lot of the other talent in the ACC. In North Carolina and Virginia Tech's probably going to be really, really good as well. But I could see them beating Florida State. They definitely could beat Michigan State and Wake Forest on the road. Pitt, they could win that one. And I like to say a little bit ago, they definitely could beat a North Carolina or a Florida State this year. So I could see Miami going 10-2. That's especially if the defense can play like they did last year and De'Aaron King gets back to his former self. But my current prediction for the 2020 Miami Hurricanes is 8-4. That's going to do it for my schedule preview and record prediction for the 2020 Miami Hurricanes. And if you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. Also consider subscribing if you are brand new to the channel. Just enjoy my content, and if you haven't done so already, please do leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the 2020 Miami Hurricanes. And as always, until next time, remember, play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.